Welcome to my metagame tier list video for the most common decks you're going to play against in Pokemon Pocket. I'm going to sort them based on power level, and then I'm going to talk through some of the key details and some of the most successful variations of each of these decks. Let's go ahead and jump on into it, shall we? We kick off our S tier category with the three headliners in the format, one from each booster pack: Mewtwo EX, Pikachu EX, and Charizard EX. The Mewtwo EX decks are the ones that have the least variation in this category. Basically, all of the most successful ones are playing the Gardevoir line, 2 Mewtwo EX, and then the Singleton Baby Mewtwo as both an additional attacker and a way to buy time early against more aggressive decks like Pikachu. Some deck lists are opting to play a 6 basic, either a Kangaskhan or a Jinx in most cases, but most are just playing the Pokemon lines that we see here, and then utility trainers like we have listed on the screen. Pikachu EX decks are the ones that have the most variation in the S tier category. They're obviously all playing 2 copies of EX Pikachu, their namesake. Almost all of them are playing 2 copies of EX Zapdos, and then the other Pokemon choices from there can vary a great deal. The sample list and the list that have been having the most success in our community tournaments are ones playing the Raichu line along with at least 1 copy of Lieutenant Surge to give you an alternative big burst finisher once you X-speed back a damaged Pikachu EX and want to close the game out with something else. Other successful variations include Zebstrika as a stage 1 over Raichu, Electrode as a stage 1 over Raichu, and even additional other just basic Pokemon like Pinchurn and Baby Zapdos like our sample deck list has. Finally, Charizard EX decks solidified their deserved place in the S tier in the last couple of weeks with the innovation of adding Growlithe and Arcanine EX as an additional attacker. This adds some much needed redundancy to this core, so in any game where you have a Moltres, you're incredibly likely to have an attacker that's worthwhile to go with it. Arcanine EX also actively solved one of the problems that this archetype had, which is it just got run over by Pikachu EX because it takes a long time to set up your stage 2s even if they hit hard, and Arcanine EX clears everything in the Pikachu EX deck in one hit sans Zapdos EX and enter the copy of Giovanni that you'll see these decks playing to clear that in one shot as well. Moving on, our B tier grouping of decks, in my opinion, is composed of Blaine decks, Greninja variations, and Weezing Dark decks. Blaine decks have the least variation in the B tier, so let's start there. Almost all of the Blaine decks are playing the Rapidash and Ninetales line, the Given, Trainers, Research, Pokeball, and then obviously their namesake Blaine, and then X-Speed as well, so you can maneuver your Pokemon around. This leaves us 4 flex slots that have some variation. In my opinion, you should be playing at least a 5th basic Pokemon, with Farfetch'd likely being the best choice, but other options here are Kangaskhan if you want to hedge something like the Pikachu matchup, or Magmar if you want another character to add damage output. You can also play a 6 basic as well, mixing and matching Singleton copies of these depending on what you're going for. In my opinion, Giovanni is a must-have at least 1, and I personally like playing 2. The notable breakpoint that Giovanni helps you hit in this deck is Ninetales with Giovanni clears opposing 100 hit point Pokemon in one go, and Giovanni plus Blaine over the course of 2 turns with Rapidash allow you to deal 70 followed by 50, which clears a Pikachu EX's 120 hit points over 2 turns. Greninja decks have a ton of variation in the supporting cast that they play, with the 2 most common variations right now being the Starmie build as well as the 2-color Mewtwo EX splash build. The core cards in these Greninja decks are the Greninja line, 1 to 2 copies of a supporting colorless Pokemon, Farfetch'd or Kangaskhan, the Given, Professor's Research, and Pokeballs, and then a mix of utility trainers that you want to play from there. Whether or not you're splashing 2 colors can give you flexibility at the cost of consistency, such as Mewtwo EX being a heavy hitter, or if you want to stay to a single color, Starmie EX, or in some cases Articuno EX, can be common choices to pair with this Ninja Frog. Our last deck list in the B tier are Weezing Koga variations, with the two most common builds being an Arbok pairing and a Wigglytuff EX pairing. These shells really excel at attacking two of the big three. They have beefy starting hit point characters that give you a lot of sustainability against Pikachu's early pressure, and you have the type advantage with your dark attackers into the Mewtwo EX deck. I think it's notable that these decks do tend to struggle into things like Charizard because you often don't get enough pressure going early to be able to clear them out before they get their big finisher set up. Moving along to our C tier decks, we have Misty based water decks, we have Venusaur Exeggutor, we have Alakazam variations, and we have Sandslash Marowak representing fighting Pokemon. Misty decks tend to move in one of two directions. We have more cheesy builds playing typically just Articuno or Articuno plus Starmie, like our sample list has here. These deck lists tend to live and die based on whether or not they find Misty and hit heads on it, planning to get early pressure and then bust if they don't. Personally, I've preferred the slightly more consistent builds featuring Blastoise EX as a bigger endgame finisher that can take advantage of good Misty variants, but aren't entirely dependent on it. Starmie EX sets up reasonably on its own, and Blastoise, even when you just organically build it up to 3 energy, hits for 40 with 2 into 100 on 3, which is still pretty solid into a lot of things that are going on in the format. Venusaur Exeggutor is an archetype that I like to refer to personally as a pub stomper, which is to say it lines up pretty poorly into the 3 most popular decks in the format. Pikachu tends to run it down before it gets set up, and Charizard blasts away even your biggest daddy plant dino in one shot. That being said, the tanky body, reasonable damage, and incredible amounts of sustain that this deck list offers means that it has a really strong matchup into most of the other stuff in this roundup video, meaning it's going to be crushing most of the off-meta decks that you queue into with any amount of consistency. Alakazam is one of the strongest Stage 2 non-EX Pokemon in Pocket right now, in my opinion. The most common variations of it are playing either Weezing with the Koga package as a frontline or Exeggutor EX with Erica as a frontline. I think this card, when you get everything together, lines up phenomenally into Mewtwo and Charizard, since they tend to have a lot of energy letting you attack for big bursts. And even against things like Pikachu EX, you hit 2 energy characters for 120 damage, which clears them in one go. That being said, Stage 2 Pokemon are inherently inconsistent, needing to assemble 3 cards over the course of the game, so you're going to have just this inherent failure rate when playing this Alakazam deck where you're not going to get to function, and these decks tend to lack a meaningful plan B, so when Alakazam doesn't show up in a reasonable amount of time, you're kind of just left high and dry. Our final deck list in the C tier is the Sandslash Marowak fighting deck. This deck list pumps out consistent damage early with single knockout point Pokemon like Sandslash and Baby Marowak, while also having access to EX Marowak as a powerful finisher who hits for an average of 80 but can high roll up to 160. I think the 2 copies of Hitmonlee in my sample list here are important to call out as well. They give you good utility against decks like Charizard, where you can stretch kick and bully their Charmander in the back that they're trying to build up energies on, really punishing them in any games where they don't find their Charmeleons early. Finally, our D tier today unfortunately stands for Dragonite tier. I know he's a fan favorite Pokemon, and I enjoy playing with him mechanically in Pocket myself, but there is no denying the fact that variations of Dragonite, whether they're the Articuno build on the screen or the Weezing build that's a little bit more popular, get registered in community tournaments very regularly and consistently get their stuff pushed in. These decks are not consistent for a variety of reasons. They're both 2 colors, they need a stage 2 Pokemon, you need 4 energy to get going, and then even at the end of all that, if it manages to come together, your deal 200 spread out randomly over the course of the board is going to have games where it simply hits the wrong things, and even after 2 attacks, you're going to come up short actually being able to close the game out. Now, the more astute among you noted at the beginning of this video that I skipped a tier. We went from the S tier with the big three down to a B tier, leaving the A tier functionally empty. This was intentional. I want to emphasize the fact that the Mewtwo, Pikachu, and Charizard EX decks are a solid cut above everything else in this video. And that's not to say that you can't have success with these other decks. In fact, every other deck in this video has spiked various community tournaments over the couple of months that Pocket has existed in the public. And if you play them well and you know your matchups, you could definitely have success with them, especially when you're just playing random matches for fun in the client. All of that being said, the results of these big three decks, not even just their popularity, but their win rates and the rate that they convert to top finishes inside of tournaments, is just far and away hyper consistent and better than all of the other lesser common, less powerful decks that I covered in the B, C, and D tiers of this video. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way to the end today. The structure of this is new for what I'm doing on this channel. I'm still trying to get a feel for exactly what type of information I want to present and how, what's most useful to you all at home. So I would love feedback on the format that I used today. Is it useful that I provide sample deck lists like I did, which you can find in the video description down below as well for easy reference? Would you prefer that I just stick to more general things and sort things into a tier list without getting into the deck list specific? I would love your feedback to sculpt the future of this channel. If you're someone that's new here watching for the first time, welcome. My name's Jeff Hoagland. I'd love if you'd tap the like button and subscribe to the channel and come back again. I have a decade's worth of experience making card game content here on the internet, playing Magic the Gathering, Marvel Snap, Runeterra, and a variety of other now defunct games before landing here in Pokemon Pocket, where you'll find me posting stuff here on this channel 7 days a week. Breakdowns like this, off-meta deck highlights, and everything else is my forte, and I'd love it if you'd come back again sometime. Hopefully your next pack's going to be an awesome one. Enjoy the rest of your day.